Um, First, we are very glad to start our panel discussion today. We're going to talk about the experience of being a Mexican student in the US. We're going to discuss about what we can learn from that and what can we apply to Mexico. First, I'm going to start presenting our panelists. I'm going to start from your left with Raul Torres. He studied a bachelor in international studies in Endicott College in Boston, Massachusetts. During his undergrad, he studied abroad at the American University of Paris. And following this, he attended Harvard University as a special status, obtaining his minor on government. Raul was admitted in the program of negotiation at Harvard Law School and Harvard Negotiation Institute. He was national coordinator of the presidential candidate Josefina Vázquez Mota for young first-time voters. He's currently studying his master's in political management at the George Washington University. He's founder of a platform called New Talents that focuses on having Mexican talents participate in Mexico's public life. He strongly believes that changes need to be made by the youth to support and activate participation in the public life. Then we have Aldo Paquiano. He's originally from Mexico City. He did a Bachelor of Science and Engineering in Computer Science and Mathematics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He received a Master's of Advanced Study in Pure Mathematics from Cambridge University in England. He's currently enrolled in the Master of Engineering in Computer Science at MIT. His academic interests span those of writing, literally text. He has worked in a variety of companies in computer science and finance. Among other things, he has worked on Facebook data science team and in an algorithm trader in jump trading. He has written many stories and a few novels. Then we have Sergio Cantú. He's from Brownsville, Texas and Ciudad Victoria, Tamaulipas. He got the magna cum laude in dual degree in physics and mathematics from the University of Texas at Brownsville, where he worked mostly designing a laser for stabilization systems for laser interferometer gravitational wave observatory, as well as designing introductory physics courses using commercial video games. He's currently a PhD student in the atomic, molecular, and optical and molecular physics at MIT. He works at the Center for Ultra-Cold Atoms in the Rydberg Laboratory of Dr. Buletic Group, and where he is currently doing research. And this group recently was able to create a real lightsaber. Then we have Diana Zamora. She is currently she's doing her master's degree in public administration and international development at the Harvard Kennedy School. Prior to coming to the U.S., she worked at the Office of the President of Mexico, and she was executive manager of experimental education program serving 45,000 students in rural Mexico. He holds a licenciatura in economics from the Center for Research and Teaching in Economics, CIDE, and she's currently advising subnational government in Colombia to improve their education policy programs. And finally, we have Miguel Angel Bonilla. He's from Puebla, and he's coming from Michigan University. His professional experience has been related with tracking the evolution of policies focused on marginalized groups. He has worked for local and federal Mexican governments in the design of the tracking and political science and international relations at CIDE in Mexico City. he has studied in Finland and Chile. He also has a master in he's also a master in public policy candidate at the University of Michigan Ann Arbor. And finally, I want to introduce Bernardo Garza. He's going to be our moderator for this session. He is currently studying in the Harvard Kennedy School of Government.
Thank you. Let's start with the first question, which is in case you spend your professional career abroad, how can you maintain a productive link with Mexico? So let's start with Raul. You have 2 minutes, please.
Okay. So it's like I was introduced before. I did my undergrad here for 4 years, and now I'm finishing my master's. And what I found that it's really interesting, or what I found like the main skill that you have, or that we have to do when we are here, is to find, like, we are all working for a project that we have in mind. Like we have seen certain presentations of really good projects, and most of these projects are related to Mexico. So one of the things that I find more interesting, like the main way to kind of being attached to Mexico, is to work during these 4 years or 2 years, depending on if you are doing your undergrad or your graduate, to make this project better, to make to continue with the links with Mexico, but still finding the ways to understand what is happening now. Because Mexico, when we leave Mexico 2 years ago or 1 year ago, it depends, Mexico didn't stop. Mexico's not going to wait for us, like saying, oh, welcome, maybe your parents will wait for you. But unfortunately, that's all. Mexico continues moving, things continue changing, and while we're here in the States, it's really important for us to get to understand what is going on now. Because our project, we can have a good project here, but if we don't understand what's really happening in Mexico, in our state, in our city, then that project is not going to be able to be enhanced in the state what you're doing. So that's what one thing I encourage, like, all the students here. But at the same time, it's to make a good network, because maybe you're working on a good project at Harvard, and maybe there's another fellow at Stanford in the other part of the country. But it's useless to work in 2 different ways when you have the same project and you can close these kind of ties. And I think like this example is really good in this exercise.
Also, please, if something in the panel is not clear, please feel free to raise your hand and make any comment or any suggestion. If you would really, please feel free to do it if you want to do it.
Aldo?
Yeah, so I'm mainly interested in doing an academic career. So I think for us that have that interest, it's important to particularly have links with whomever is doing similar things in our own country, and also have links with whomever is doing Mexican people that are doing academic things throughout the world, and also do our job very well, because it's always a good image. So one day I actually went in England. I went to talk to the ambassador of Mexico, and he was mentioning that, well, we are the face, those who are outside Mexico and are successful in whatever field we are somewhat the face of the country, right? So contributing towards the image of Mexico outside by being good at what we do and maybe acknowledging our roots, and as he says, never lose, and never forget, or never really forget to look back and see what's actually going on and changing. It's always very good. And maybe also it's good to, while we're in this position, try to work as a voice for change. And in my case, I think something that I really care about is to try to promote science, technology, and engineering in Mexico, because these things are a little bit underrepresented in our nation, and I think they're very important for development. So working towards that, being a voice in some sense, that'd be a good idea.
Thank you. Sergio?
So for me, it's I'm a little lucky because my undergrad was right at the border of Texas and it's Brownsville and Matamoros. So I have the advantage that I can always go back to my undergrad where my parents live now, and I can hold some sort of meeting or workshop that people can. It's easy for them to cross because it's 5 minutes away. But also something that always bothered me while I was going through undergrad is that I never really interacted with most Mexicans I would go to conferences and I wouldn't see that many Mexicans or Mexican Americans. So what I did when I graduated undergrad is that I went to UNAM to try to see if I could help anyway and start something. But the problem is that what I found is that there were just no resources to start. And when you have things, my field is in AMO, which usually you need to build a chamber, you need atoms, you need lasers, you need things pile up quickly. And it's easy to kind of lose sight of, to giving back, because it can very well take all the time that you have. So for me, it's a matter of, I feel like if I decide to stay in academia, it's a matter of, I need to be able to establish myself and make a name for myself so that I can help people back. Because it's hard, when you're starting and you're, I don't know, you just graduated your undergrad in academia, it's just not enough to have a bachelor's. So I hope that, now that I'm in a PhD, I have a little bit more of a hierarchical authority, and I can start maybe a conversation again, not only with people in UNAM, but maybe join the Club de Ciencia and help in any way I can.
Right, thank you. Diana?
So I would like to say that I have probably 3 things that I would like to mention here. I think that we as Mexicans have the opportunity, for any reason you want to stay in the States, there are still ways that you can help your country, like working for the IADD or for the World Bank, which already, if you decide to stay here, they always have good ties to Mexico. The second, and it's something more of my personal view, is I think that some of us, particularly in the social sciences, come back to work, for example, for the public service, and we usually think about the federal level of government in Mexico. And I really think that there are subnational governments, and I say this because right now I'm advising a subnational government in Colombia, but I really think that there are 2 Mexicos. One is the federal level Mexico, which follows certain rules, and there have been some regulations that have passed. For example, Ley de Transparencia, the transparency that we already enjoy. When anyone that works in the government, you can just click and know their wages, their benefits, and that doesn't happen actually in state level. So I think there's a lot of heterogeneity that we, with the capabilities that we have developed here, and with all the things that we want to do, that's a way that probably our comparative advantage could be leveraged. And the third one, something that is, for me, it's something very similar to what Sergio was saying. Find someone to mentor in many different ways. If it's a little cousin of yours thinking about, do I like math or not, just tell them, this is how much you will earn if you actually learn math right now, and this is how much you will not. Very simple. Or we all have gone through the process of applying to a US university, and it's such a structured process, and it doesn't matter if you apply to law or to economics. They all want to hear your story, and you already have told that story to someone many times. So try to teach anyone you want to do that, because you already know how to.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's a very hard question for people that study public policy, because you are supposed to implement policies or projects that affect and create a good impact in the people. And not coming back, at least in my case, always makes me think like, okay, the money that I'm receiving from federal funds, the money that I'm receiving from CONACYT, maybe could be spent in another way. Maybe these $1,000 that we are receiving from the federal government, from the taxes from the people, could be spent in I don't know, in the rural community to bring more education for the kind of students. But I also think, and I agree with Diana, that maybe the best place where you can make a difference in Mexico is not in Mexico. You can work for an international organization, as she said. You can try to make changes in another kind of behavior. You can try to tutor students, or you can just try to inspire them to look for better opportunities. And that's why maybe most of the people that in academia are trying to pursue it. And that's what I find most valuable in this event, because you are really getting out of this place, like inspired about what Mexican people can do. And finally, I would say that even if you work for the private sector, and even if you are just looking for the revenues of a big company, you can still try to make a difference helping people that maybe don't have the knowledge that you have. And I don't know, I have seen that many consulting firms that are small give free service for disadvantaged students. So that can make a difference in Mexico, and that can be helpful to improve the economy.
Thank you. If someone wants to comment on this would be a great time to do it. If not, we will go to the next question. What can we learn from the higher education system in the US, and how the higher education in Mexico be improved? How can? So let's start with Raul.
I think the big difference between education here in the States and in Mexico, it's about the culture that we have here in the States about internships. I think that's crucial because in Mexico we tend to just go for 4 or 5 years, take exams, do whatever like our professors tell, and that's all. But here in the US you have to be more proactive. You have to start doing, and you have to start knowing what you are like good on and what you are not good. And at the same time, it generates this issue of like being competitive. Because in Mexico, sometimes in schools, you get to be like, okay, I'll just pass, I'll just study for this exam, and that's all. But here in the States, what you learn is to be competitive. You need to be the best of the class sometimes. But what I always try to advise is not to get the perfect GPA. Because I remember one politician once told me, not because you went to Harvard, you're going to get the candidacy. And that was a personal experience, and that's true. Like, and that can be applied to any other sector, like politics or the private sector. It's about doing the network. It's about knowing what you are good, knowing about like other people that can trust on your project, and how to build that project and make the difference. That's what another person once told me. It's like, you've learned different things in the States. Make the difference. That's the way you can change how things work here. And so that's, I think it's like the clue of what the U.S. education makes different, and how Mexican schools, if we try to work more on internships on this issue of studying abroad and like bring a more international atmosphere, that can work.
Thank you. Aldo?
Yes, I have a similar point, and I think there are two things that I found, particularly at MIT, that were very, very important in my education. And both of them contributed to my education in the sense that they made it more hands-on than I think it would have been in Mexico. And those two things are, one is doing research as an undergrad, being a researcher or doing a research with a faculty that's a researcher in the field, being able to actually being in a lab and doing something that has to do with science today, what's the forefront of science. That's a very valuable experience for whoever wants to be in academia, but also those who want to be in industry. And the second experience is internships, which is also very hands-on and industry-related. So I think these experiences are very, very enriching for the students, and both for even for the university when it's about cheap labor that they get from students, undergrads doing research in some labs, and industry, because then you can get to hire better people and you can get to evaluate them more. So, and I think the most important one for my academic-wise, or in terms of like being an academic, it's this program that MIT has. It's called Undergraduate Research Opportunities Programs. MIT has some money, and then maybe other universities have the same throughout the U.S. that allocates so that undergrads can do research projects with faculty and be paid for it. So I think some schemes like that in some way, in some fashion, would be very useful. And also kind of the paid internship that you can get, or unpaid internships that you can get that can give you experience throughout your undergrad, are also extremely helpful. So I think those are the kind of like very more hands-on experiences are, I think, very valuable. I could change many things.
Thank you. Sergio?
I just wanted to amend what you said. This MIT summer program accepts people that are coming. If you're a Mexican here in the U.S. in any U.S. institution, you can apply, and they will take you. You don't require U.S. citizenship. I think for me, the two things that I noticed the most, and I think that is the most difference, is that first, I noticed that universities are a lot more clustered. That is that you can pinpoint them in like a couple of cities. And something that I have seen here in the U.S. while I was in undergrad, my university is very small, so sometimes I took part in writing the rants for the funding. And I noticed that there's very good data that shows that any dollar that the government spends in a specific area or in a specific university, and specifically in science, you get a 3-to-1 ratio of the economic development in the city, because people go and they, if the government invests in the university can have a better equipment that can train the engineers, the scientists, and they can themselves, get a better job, which usually triples down and multiplies. That's something that I think Mexico would benefit if they start kind of branching out and investing in places where maybe people don't have the sort of opportunities that are there. The second one I think is that, I think a proof of this, of what you said, is that I think most people here are from either the Estado de Mexico or Mexico City. I have never met people from my state. I'm from Tamaulipas. I have never met them here. So I think it's very telling of the current status of higher education in Mexico. Also, something that happens is that, growing up in Ciudad Victoria, I never met someone that was a scientist. I don't know about you. I never met someone that was, that didn't go through higher education to just, either be a doctor, be a lawyer, be a politician, or be a teacher. Or some sort of mechanical engineer or electrical engineer, but not necessarily a PhD. I think that's something also that is very striking, that people understand that there's value in higher education, and is very telling. Sorry.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, I think that in order to think about how college or university is thought about in Mexico, I would like to take it one step before. So particularly, how are we preparing and how we are using our talent, particularly who gets into which high school in Mexico. And I'm going to put a very specific example of Mexico City. I think that in the States, no talent goes to waste. If you really want to get into university, you will get accepted. Probably not the one of your dreams, and if you have the means, probably you get in. However, in Mexico, you have this meritocratic way of choosing who gets into which high school in Mexico City. And usually we hear about these young people that do not get a place, and that's not true, because they do get a place, but they get a place in the worst performing high schools in Mexico City. And this is a meritocratic way of, by just looking at your score. Of course, UNAM and Politecnico high schools get the highest and the best scores, but these scores are highly correlated with their economic background. And I really think that we need to correct that. And that model is probably been done again in some other states, but we're wasting talent there, because there's recent papers that if you see two students who got kind of the same score, but just the cutoff it was 111, the other one was 110, and then one goes to Politecnico and the other one goes to CONALEP or CEBETIS or whatever, by the end of those 3 years, those two students are completely different. The skills that they have are different. And that is just like, they were very, very similar at some point, and just this meritocratic, and I just put this quotation marks because it's not actually meritocratic, it's actually getting rid of talent and getting rid of people who could actually go to college.
Thank you. Miguel?
I will say two things. The first one that I think we should learn from the US is the decentralization of education. You can find great universities in the West Coast, in the East Coast, in the South, in the Midwestern, and that's not a phenomenon that occurs in Mexico, as Sergio was saying. If you want to find the best universities in Mexico, you can only focus on 5 cities, and I'm being very general with the education system in Mexico. That's a structural problem, and maybe we are not going to fix it, and maybe we are just going to complain about it. So I was thinking that I think that maybe in Mexico doesn't occur, and in the US, most of the alumni do is to donate to their home university. I mean, here, like the recordation campaigns, like the campaigns for recording funds from the alumni are so big that they allow to get more scholarship for more people, to get better infrastructure in the universities. And this is my case. If my home university requires me to donate money to pay the tuition of a guy that cannot pay it, I would do it extremely, I would do it with joy and really thinking that I'm making a difference. And I think that it's also related a little bit with what Diana was talking about. the decentralization and the poor links between the universities and the alumni can be provocating that we are wasting talent and that we are losing a lot of kids and a lot of young people that can really get higher than they are really getting now.
Thank you. Next question. How does the relationship between universities and industry contribute to the quality of higher education in the US? And how can this relationship be promoted in Mexico?
So, talking about the relation of the industry and schools, like I'll explain what I've experienced, and it's always been not in the business sector but the public one. Studying government here and in Washington now, the public sector, or like these huge agencies, are really interlinked with all different schools. They have these, as I mentioned before, these programs of internships and sometimes even scholarships. Not only from here, from the States, but actually there are a lot of organizations and enterprises, even some public agencies that fund certain students to come here to the States and how to start working on a project that it's like if you were working here, but at the same time in Mexico, or at the same time in the public agents here in the States. So what I feel is like the big difference is that the public or the private in this case with industry and schools are really interlinked. There is this way of thinking the same way, of creating more the entrepreneurship culture, and that's one thing that we need to bring even to Mexico, because like we were discussing before, maybe the wages that can be paid for us in Mexico are not the ones that could be like according to having a good degree from the States. But we need to go back and learn and explain and apply what we've learned here about this union between the business sector or the public, if you're working in issues of government, and schools, and it's like a cycle that you can start bringing up.
Thank you. Aldo?
Yeah, so the same kind of on the same line of the internship idea, that gives you the opportunity of experiencing kind of the real world while you are a student, and that's I think very, very useful. But apart from that, I think one important thing is that industry here does invest in research. So there's money that comes from companies that is invested in doing research. And so academia and industry are somewhat talking to each other. Something that conversation I think doesn't really happen that much at least in Mexico. Maybe either because this particularly I guess in public universities might be the idea that industry is kind of bad or something, or like evil. And I think that should change because we are here to, that should just change because that may bring more money, more resources to doing research. And that will benefit everyone, both industry, and I think it's that both parties should realize that both industry can benefit by getting patents or other things or whatnot from academics, and academics can benefit because they can have more resources for doing their research. So that kind of interaction I think is very important and should change. And then on the last thing is entrepreneurship. It's really we are here very, very focused on that, particularly I guess in universities like this one or the one down the road. And I think this is very important because of course like eventually people that really try to open companies or start new ventures might actually end up hitting a big thing, right? And if there is this environment of fostering entrepreneurship, and obviously this needs policies to be able to open companies easily and whatnot, but if we had this culture, then eventually maybe we could hit something big, right? Someone can do something great. And maybe that culture I think doesn't really exist. There should be some way to start it and foster it more. Yeah, so that's it.
Great. Sergio?
I think, yeah, for me it's the same thing. I've noticed that universities here, MIT, as an example, has a network of entrepreneurs that, they're called entrepreneurs in residence, that students can go into and talk about any idea that they might have that could become a company or become a startup at any point. And I think it's very viable to do things like this in Mexico. I have a friend that he started a company called Bioface, which takes the seed of the avocado and makes it into a resin and makes plastic out of it. And that's a company that is starting, and it seems to be very, very promising. And I think that things like that I would love to see, and I think it's very sad that the universities kind of see this as just themselves as a bridge and kind of like don't care about what the students are gonna do after they graduate. I think it's a little bit of a commitment to your own brand. If I'm a university, I want to make sure that the students that I make are out there and they're doing cool things and they're changing the world. And I think to do things like this, I think it will be interesting to maybe start a conversation about, like you said, these internship programs that you never know where you will end or what you would hit if you get a new idea or a cool idea. What will happen with that? So.
Thank you. Diana?
So I think there's one thing, I'm going to deviate a little bit because the question is between universities and industry. I'm coming from a public policy school. I can only think about the link of the university and how you interact with government. And taking some lessons from here, I think that our universities in Mexico, both private and public, do not help college students to interact enough in a personal way with the people that are on the ground. Just thinking about in the Kennedy School, during a normal week, you can interact with a legislator, with a senator, with someone who is doing environmental policy, and it's a very, very casual thing to do. I think in Mexico sometimes we have these hierarchies, whereas in the States it's just like if that person is there and you all are having pizza at the same time, you can ask him questions, him or her. So I think that's something, it's an opportunity there that we haven't probably exploded as much. It would be great if of all of these networks that professors or even administrative staff within the university can bring once a week someone that is already there in the government, because there's nothing like this personal interaction. And I don't know about you, but when I came to the States, I didn't understand what networking was. I didn't even know what the concept was. And you start understanding what it is, and we don't take advantage of that when we're in college. And then your servicio social comes, when you're actually doing something like that, and you don't know what to do. So I think it's a very, very practical thing to have in mind, but it could be very easily implemented in Mexican colleges.
Thank you. Miguel?
I would disagree a little bit, because I think that some private schools really have a good relationship with industries in Mexico, but it's not, it doesn't occur in all the cities, and it doesn't occur in all the universities, and it's only focused in certain cases. I will give like 2 anecdotal examples. But I'm from Puebla, my wife is from Toluca, and all the relatives of my wife that studied in Tec de Monterrey Campus Toluca were hired by an automotive company after they finished their college degree. And it's like, once you enter into Tec de Monterrey, you will get hired by a mother's company. And in Puebla, it's almost the same when you come from certain universities and you become from UDLA to the Volkswagen, for example. And I think these universities are doing a great job. But, however, this could be more related with the kind of selection process that are implemented by the industries. I don't know how many of you have been recruited to a company by a transparent process where you are becoming by several tests. Can you raise your hand? If somebody? 1, 2, 3, 4. Most of the times, the kind of ways, well, this in my case, and in any case that I know, the way you find a job in Mexico is just by the people that you know, the people that was friend of your dad, the people that you knew when you were in high school or when you were in elementary school. And I think that's a problem that the universities hasn't faced yet, because it's convenient for them to maintain these kind of structures in the future. And I would think that we could learn something about that from the US, where you have to spend a lot of time looking for a job opportunity. And for the people that are looking for the opt, I don't know how many of you have done a lot of interviews here, like for the training session after you finish your master degree. Can you raise your hand? Oh, don't raise your hand.
Well, last question.
We got a comment here.
No, I just raised my hand to see
Oh.
that you raised the question, so I answered.
You have a question?
Yeah.
please.
It's like for the internship things, we're here in Mexico. In Mexico, we have what it's called prácticas profesionales. But the thing is about the education and the cultural sides, or how we take the thing seriously, because we do have, and we just go and to have the hours like managed. But it's also like if you want to participate in the job thing and all that stuff, it's for more of the people that live in Mexico. It's like, I mean, if you are working and they're not paying you, it's like, man, why do I have to work and study and they're not paying? That's how we think. Like I'm wasting my time. It's like we don't see like a long-term investment by doing their internships. So we do have that. Also, all the jobs here in the United States are also because the networking you have is not after transparency. You maybe be able to have all the skills they need you for the job, but also you need to have this networking and the people you have to know to get in that job. So I think the opportunity thing we can take about the States for the education in Mexico, it's the opportunity to be able to take out to the status quo of the alumni that lives in the house of your mom and all that stuff till you finish your undergraduate, and you can like send to Puebla and send to Querétaro and send to a lot of different states, so they can like be outside of the bubble of the family. I think that is a prior thing for the education in Mexico.
Thank you. Does someone want to comment on this?
Over there. Up there.
Okay.
Just a quick question for the panel. I read recently an article saying that the whole internship culture here in the US and in Europe was strengthening inequality. Because the people that can afford to do unpaid internships in the summer are the people that don't have to work in the summer for not very glamorous jobs that do pay. So how do you avoid this type of perverse incentives of giving working experience to people that might have gotten the job anyways through connections, and depriving, like if you have to go back and say, hey, I have a year of experience and you didn't get a chance to do these summer internships, how can we design a system that avoids this type of incentives?
So, well, I mean, maybe one thing is, in my experience, the thing is, of course, I studied at MIT, right? So it's a bit different from other colleges in the US. And I studied computer science, a field in which there is lots of money. So internships pay you, and you are equally, like you are interviewed in an equal basis with anyone else. It's not like I know Mark Zuckerberg, right? So somehow you apply to these jobs through your university career service, and you are the same guy as that guy, and so like you are the same guy within the university. Of course, the name or like the branding will help you, but your qualifications at the end are going to be the ones that get you the job. And usually these tech companies do pay something for your internship, so it's not like you're going to be dying of hunger there. And actually, it's a job in the summer. Of course, this might not be the case for other fields, and in general, it's not the case for other fields. But yeah, I mean, in my experience, it was not biased in that sense. Biased conditioned on the fact that I was doing computer science, and I was doing computer science at MIT, right? So, I mean, of course, that's kind of like already biased. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to make the point that in theory, you are kind of like equally qualified or like assessed in the same level as anyone else that's applying for the same job.
Someone else wants to comment on this?
Yeah, I mean,
before
very
we pass on the
quickly.
next question?
Yeah, like, I mean, my undergrad was a super small school that is going to cease to exist in like 3 years because it's merging with another small school to make a medium size. But so I feel like the main difference is that yes, there's always an issue that like, look, STEM fields always pay internships. It doesn't matter where you go, and I think that's also a matter of investment when it comes to the schools. You know, like we just said, yes, there's this. You know, even here you need. Every once in a while, it also helps to know someone inside of the company, right? That's everywhere. But I think the difference is that, for example, at least here, companies have a name. For example, you know that the guy from Facebook went to Harvard, I think, MIT. I don't know. You know which big names went to which schools, and you don't need that on itself is a brand that the universities, you don't need to rely on, you know that you're an equal footing,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And I think that's something that is missing in Mexico. Like, if, I have no idea what it means. It's just very sad that if I'm coming in from tech, which, you don't feel like your skills will be kind of like on an equal footing. It will always be like, well, who knows who? And that's always who trumps. And I think that's the main difference.
Also for this, just to mention, like, just for these jobs, usually there is some kind of online application, for example, in which you submit your resume, and maybe whomever wants to submit their resume, they can. And they'll be filtered by the company, which of course the filter will be biased, because you'll be biased. But in some sense it is not completely, because I know that guy. They'll see who are you, what have you done, what have you studied, etc., and that'll be the kind of filter. But I mean, of course, it is.
I would just add one thing. For example, in the issue about internships and bringing this culture into Mexico, and like get to show that there are these paid and unpaid internships, especially in Mexico, that are not doing that well right now economically. In the Mexican Congress, in the National Congress right now, I don't know if you've heard about La Ley del Primer Empleo. So we're trying to make a second step, go a little bit further, and to bring, because this internship culture is more here in the US and Europe, and we're starting it up in Mexico. So what we want to do is to bring and make these companies understand that las prácticas profesionales, or like the internships, need to be paid at least with a minimum, like the same wage that you would be paying to someone else that has the same level. Especially if it's from like school in Mexico, or sometimes a lot of people that are studying here want to do their internships back in Mexico. And so it's a way to have them, okay, like we'll pay for you because it's according to the law. So that's what we're trying to do. But one thing that we need is to have like all of you guys that know what internships are about, to help us define this platform, this initiative. Because like a lot of congressmen in Mexico are writing this kind of adaptation of the law. They don't understand what an internship is, or the difficulties that an internship has. So it's like, okay, like what's an internship? It's just like práctica profesional. It's like go and work for 6 months and that's all. But if we have all your support, your expertise, that you've been here and you understand what an internship is, and like in the whole concept, then it can help us. And that's what we're doing.
Thank you. Sir, let me start my question with a question to all of you. How many of the people here that studied in Mexico, their undergraduate, had a friend or a fellow student whose first language was an indigenous language? Indigenous language. I think one of the things that is very interesting is that you focused on things like internships and stuff, but I think the main problem in Mexico, and one of the things we can learn about the United States, has to do with integration. And before talking about internships or work opportunities or business, the great problem with Mexican education is, you mentioned it briefly, is that so many kids are not being able to be educated, and that there's so many marginalization and so much racism in Mexico, that, I mean, the question about jobs and internships is one that one can ask when one has the ability to feed himself, to have a house, to have a lot of things that we have, but that 60% of Mexicans don't have. I studied at the UNAM, and a lot of the people that were working, I mean, most of the people that were working at UNAM were working to make a living for their families at the same time they were studying. They were working at the OXXO, they were working wherever they could. For them, the idea of an internship is impossible, right? So, I mean, it does apply to certain, groups, but I think in the table, it wasn't mentioned that, one of the main problems is who gets education in Mexico, how they get them, why if there's 12% of indigenous Mexicans in the country, they're so underrepresented in our universities. Why is there no indigenous Mexican here, for example, right? Whereas in the United States, you have representation from Hispanics, Asians, Afro-Americans. I just wanted to put that into.
And just to add, yes, I agree with you. And in a sense, I think that if we are all here, we can be more critical. Like racism and all these kind of problems also are here. There's an educational crisis here in the States too that's not being addressed in a way that I don't know how much of an example we can draw, and maybe different dynamics where we can all think about how we as US, well, Mexican students in here can do something about education in Mexico, can be more productive than just, I don't know, repeating some ideas that I think can be deepened to build something different. Because, I don't know, rates of incarceration, who is getting in jail here in the States, I don't know if we can really draw a lot of examples from here to Mexico, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely true, and I think that it's a structural problem in Mexico, that we are reproducing inequalities, and it's really difficult for a person to break like the chain. I will give you an example about what Diana was telling about, that you are telling your story. Of my grandparents, 3 of them didn't finish the elementary school, and they did something in that position that allowed my parents to finish the graduate school, and I'm here now. But many times I think about that, and I say like, okay, all the people that studied with my mom in the same little town in Puebla, in the mountain of Puebla, none of them get later to the college, and then many of them didn't get to college, and any of them dreamed with studying abroad. So I definitely agree with you, but it's also a structural problem, and that it's not really easy to find a way to solve a problem that is not only about education, and it's not only about education and the opportunities of us in the US, or the difference between the Mexican and US systems. It's more about social and structural problems that we have faced for hundreds of years, and that many times it's just a personal decision to break. I don't know what it is.
And I think it also goes back to what we were mentioning, that this clustering problem in Mexico, that there's only a handful of schools. If more schools were closer to people that are native, then I think it would be easier for them to go to school without sacrificing maybe leaving their family behind. And it's an extra pair of hands that could help bring food or bring sustainability to the family itself.
So, please.
I just wanted to add that I think that, as you mentioned, the system in the AFA on high schools, I think it's translated also to private universities in Mexico. I see that private universities here in the U.S. want to attract the highest talent, the most talented individuals. And in Mexico, it's not always the case. If you see, UTAM or Tec de Monterrey, most of the people that study there are because they can pay those schools. It's not because they attract the highest talent. And of course, indigenous people don't have the means to pay those universities. So if private universities have the funding or the endowments that U.S. universities had, they would be able to have more scholarships oriented to people with not so much resources, but that are highly talented. And that would ease up the mix of people that are studying in private universities.
Thank you. And last comment?
Very short comment. I think that what you were mentioning about indigenous communities, one of the very basic things is that until sixth or ninth grade, there are textbooks in almost every language. However, if you reach ninth grade and you want to keep studying, there's no more textbooks in your native language. And that's just like a very clear barrier that the Mexican state has decided to put. An additional thing, usually indigenous people have more dropout rates, particularly in secondary school. And it's because the trade-off and the opportunity cost is really high. You are already strong enough to probably work outside your house and bring something back home. It's a tough decision. It has to do with like a cost of opportunity.
Thank you.
Just to add a little bit to your point of that, the universities in the U.S. are, a lot more proactive at looking for talent rather than just, looking for people who can pay the tuition. I think that speaks a lot to the way that the funding is given to private universities in the U.S. So, for example, 50% of the resources from MIT come directly from research grants. So these are money that comes from projects that principal investigators could, and then government and different industries, and mainly government gives a lot of money just to perform those research into MIT, and it pays for graduate students, and then it has a different sense because research in the U.S. is kind of a way to earn money. So the logic behind it is that, okay, if I get the best students, I'm going to do better research, and then I'm going to get a lot more grants. I think this is something we can apply into Mexico. Actually, I have brought this whole idea into our online platform that it's online since today. So I invite you to read about it. There's a lot of details about this idea, and I just want this to be more like a seed. And I think this can be a whole project that we can all do together, as a lab, as members of this lab.
What's your webpage?
So this is the website of Lab Ideas,
Ah.
which is going to be presented in just a second.
Thank you. We don't have more time, but let me thank the panel, Raúl, Aldo, Sergio, Diana, and Miguel, for this really interesting debate. Certainly, we in Lab Ideas believe that sharing different points of view is basic. It's something that we should do every time, every day, because it's the only way to improve how we think about things. So Bert, thank you for this interesting debate, and we'll keep with the day. Thank you.